So, all good things must come to an end, so the saying goes. Often in life, certain avenues of pleasure are somewhat curtailed from us, and I have reached such a point in my life, I'm afraid, where as a consequence of that, I'm going to be selling my entire Porsche collection. So let me explain. I am lucky enough over the last few years to have built up a collection of no less than 7 Porsche 911s, classic Porsche 911s at that. Not the new stuff, that's not really my bag, but the older stuff, the classic stuff, as I will explain in a second. And unfortunately, there's been a bit of a debate at home as to the money, frankly, that I've got tied up in these cars and where it should be going. So of course, my answer to that particular conundrum was, good idea, let's talk about consolidating this little collection and sticking it all into a Singer turbo study. Those cars are about 800 grand, of course. Funnily enough, with Mrs. Quirk, that is an argument that didn't go down particularly well, I'm afraid. Instead, where I'm in the red corner, all for the Singer, she's rather in the blue corner, where she says, no, be sensible, we should be buying a house. Okay, so let me talk you through the collection of cars, and I think we'll start with what I think will be the cheapest one first. Bear with me. So, this is a 1979 911 SC, one of the first ones, second year of production, right-hand drive, of course. As it's an early SC, it's the 180 brake horsepower version, and as you can see, it's in a rather fetching colour, a rather fetching shade of blue, Minerva blue, with this really, really cool, what I call Bay City Rollers interior. And I say that not to take the piss, but actually it's very reminiscent of that if you're old enough to remember them. But what a cool combination. 80,000 miles. I have spent about £8,000 on this car. When I bought it as a project car from Ollie at Bure Valley Classics, it wasn't running well, so I had to have that rectified. So it's had all sorts of engine work, induction bits replaced. It's had new Bilstein dampers. It drives absolutely great. Paintwork is about 6 out of 10, if I'm honest, and the interior is okay, a little bit tatty, but it is what it is. It's a 1979, one of the first of 911 SCs, and actually, if you look here, there's a link to a video that Tom and I did where we talk a lot more about this particular car from when I bought it a year or so ago. This car is going to be 49 grand. One of the cheapest ways to get into an air-cooled 911. In fact, the 911 SC is the cheapest air-cooled 911. Certainly much, much, much cheaper, better value if you like, than a 3.2 Carrera or definitely a 964 or a 993. So Minerva Blue, 1979, T-plate, 911 SC. It's lovely, a bit of a project car, needs some paintwork, but otherwise all good. Just had an MOT, which it's sailed through, by the way, with no advisories whatsoever. I love this car. Oh, and by the way, I forgot to mention, these seats are original 1970s Porsche sport seats. And apparently, if you want to buy a set of seats alone on eBay or wherever, these seats are about £4,000 or £5,000 a pair now, if you can find a set. Okay, so next is this. This is a 1988 F-plate 3.2 Carrera, technically, I think, a sport Targa on the basis that it's got the whale tail. In factory black, linen leather. This actually is the first 911 that I bought when I started accumulating Porsche 911s a few years ago, and this is again another wonderful, wonderful car. It's been painted in the past but done very, very well. The interior needs a little bit of a tidy up. It's on 120,000 miles, but it's got full history. I have spent over the last 6 or 7 years a few quid on it here and there just to keep it running and to make sure that it's in tip-top condition. I probably do 500 miles a year in this car, and it's always great. And genuinely, no matter what I get out of to get into this car, as I drive down the road, it puts a big, big smile on my face. Very, very importantly, it's got a G50 gearbox. My recommendation, what do I know, but is if you're going to buy a 3.2 Carrera, you buy a post-86, 87 car with the G50 gearbox, which this has. By the way, this is 55 grand. Okay, car number 3. is this. Now, this is rather an interesting thing. It looks like a 2.7 RS. If it was, I'd be asking you 400 to 500 grand for it. It's not. It's a tribute, but it is a genuine right-hand drive 1972 911 2.4e that many years ago apparently it was converted to a race car, but also RS spec. So it's got RS flares, it looks like an RS decals, ducktail at the back and so on. And not only does this look very much like an RS, in fact, when I went to the Le Mans Classic in 2023, I parked this and I had several RS owners from the French RS Owners Club come up to me to ask about the car because they thought it was real. I've never pretended it's real. It's not a real 2.7 RS. It does look like one, but the reason I bought it was because it was a genuine race car. It's still FIA registered, so it had a full cage, which is now a half cage. So when I bought it, I converted the car more to street spec, so it now has slightly more comfortable seats. It's still got the harnesses, it's still got a fire extinguisher. I had door cards fitted, new carpets, headlining, and so on. The engine was rebuilt about 2,000 miles ago, apparently. It drives brilliantly. I've never really tracked it. I did take it on a kind of pretend track day for Flat 6 at Goodwood last year, where it did very well. And honestly, it's not the most powerful car you're going to see on the track. You know, it's not a 964 RS, it's not a 993 turbo, it definitely isn't a 992 GT3 RS, but it is about 200 brake horsepower and it weighs about 900 kilos because it's stripped out, lightweight. It's great fun, and whether you want something that looks really cool, or you want something to race or rally, or you want something for hill climbs, this is a fantastic thing, and actually raced at the Le Mans Classic in 2018. Driver was, and the owner driver was a chap by the name of Adam Dawson, and it placed 5th at the Le Mans Classic in its class. So it's got some real provenance. It's a proper race car, but now for the road. 100 grand to you. Whew. Right, car number 4 is this. This is my 1990 964 Carrera 2 Coupe, increasingly a rare car. There weren't that many produced for the UK because, of course, between 1989 and 1993, when these cars were being produced new, there was rather an international global recessionary crisis, so not that many were built and produced. Again, a right-hand drive car. All my cars are right-hand drive. This I bought from JZM about 2 years ago, and the reason I bought it, apart from wanting a manual, as it is, Carrera 2 Coupe, was because the car had been very well sorted by Russ at JZM. It's had a full windows out, bare metal repaint in Guards Red, as you can see, done very well indeed. It's got PPF on the front. It's also had a full engine rebuild. Those in the know will realise that when the 964 was built, they built the engine apparently without gaskets. So obviously as the car gets older, they start to leak a little bit of oil. This has been completely rebuilt by JZM with 993 gaskets. So no leaks. Engine is perfect, gearbox is perfect, the car is perfect. It also has KW suspension that was fitted by JZM in what they described as RS stance, so it looks like an RS, again, not pretending it is. It's still got the Carrera 2 badge on the back, it's got the standard Carrera 2 interior, but it is a very nice indeed. 120,000 mile Carrera 2 Coupe, but with a full engine rebuild 1,000 miles ago, full paint, 17-inch cup replica alloys, and it drives and goes fantastically. Actually, a very quick car. Again, a bit like some of the other cars that I've been talking about as older cars. They might only be 230, 240, 250 brake horsepower, but they all weigh 11 or 1,200 kilos, these things. So, you know, they're pretty quick even by today's standards. So, this car, 80 grand. So that's car number 4. Car number 5 is this one here, the only water-cooled car that I have in this little pastiche of 911s. Again, and I know I would say this because I'm biased, but a very special car. This is a 997.2 GT3 Club Sport. So cage, carbon bucket seats, and so on. This has done just 14,000 miles. I'm, I think, the 3rd owner. The car also has ceramic brakes, front axle lift, a thing called dynamic engine mounts. Just been serviced, I say just, 7 months ago by Porsche East London. Big 2-year service at a cost of about £2,000, and it also has the balance of Porsche warranty that I placed on the car back then in May. This, for anybody that knows about 997 GT3s, this is not only a beast because it's 400 plus brake horsepower, manual transmission, 6-speed of course, very importantly. Some people say though that the 997 GT3.2 is the best of all GT3s because it is still quite raw, quite visceral, doesn't have electronic steering, but importantly, here's the thing, and this is why I think this is going to be collectible and will go up in value, it's the last of the Metzger engined GT3s. Metzger, of course, very, very famous Porsche engine designer. He designed the engine that went into the GT1, which this, I'm pointing at the front, the engine's at the back, by the way, this is a variant of. So 997.2 GT3, again, love this car. It is very, very quick indeed, great fun. I have only used it on a track day once. That was at Goodwood in the wet, and so I didn't go very fast. And it was one of those Porsche club days where there's only 8 people on the track at a time, so very, very regulated. This car is perfect, and it's £125,000. By the way, if you want a 997.2 GT3 RS now, expect to pay 200 grand, basically for a wing on the back. Okay, and last but definitely not least is this. This is my favourite car, not because it's the last one and therefore by definition the most expensive. It's 150 grand, by the way, let's get that out the way right at the beginning. But this, I think, is the epitome of the Porsche 911. Porsche 911, depending on which side of the fence you are on that particular pronunciation. This is my 911 964 3.3 turbo. I think possibly the lowest mileage example in Britain. It's done just 48,000 miles. I'm the 4th owner. The car was stored for a number of years and did no mileage, but apart from that has full and proper service history. It's just been repainted at Design 911 by Graham there, done exceptionally well. It's just had a little bit of engine work because it had some weepy rocker covers. They've now been renewed and that problem rectified. New brake discs, new brake pads. I've spent probably £8,000 or £9,000 on this car. Don't tell my wife, by the way, since I've owned it 3.5 years, I reckon I've owned this car. It is beautiful, it is perfect, and of course is the successor to what I guess you could argue is the most famous Porsche ever, which is the Porsche 930, the 930 turbo. So this is the successor to that. Bigger turbo, intercooled, 5-speed gearbox, of course, 964 chassis, 964 coilover suspension, power steering, ABS. I would argue a better, more usable car than the 930. I know some of you are going to say, no, but the 930 is raw and visceral and organic and so on. I get all that. But to me, this as a kind of step up from the 930, this is the perfect 911 and certainly a version of what some of us, many of us, would have had on the bedroom wall as kids as a car to look up to. 964 turbo, Grand Prix white, classic grey interior, which is like new. This car's just had a Porsche inspection, and apart from the bits that I've mentioned that I've now rectified, this car is perfect, lovely history. And I have to tell you, the one that I really do not want to sell. If there's one left and it's this one, I'll actually be very, very happy. This is the car that emotionally I'm really attached to. It's also, I think, the car that over the next 3 to 5 years is going to break through £200,000 as a value. If you look at the 3.6 turbo, which is the same car but with another 300 cc's only, albeit much more limited in production, about 46 of those in the UK, but there's only about 113 right-hand drive 3.3 turbos in the UK, but 3.6 turbos are now £350,000 to £400,000. Of course, as those cars are increasing in value, they're dragging the value of the 3.3 up as well. So I think 3 to 5 years, this will be a 200 grand car, which apart from the way it looks, drives, feels, and the fact that it is an absolute head turner, they're the reasons that I really don't want to sell it, but at 150 grand, I will. So here we are in the 964 turbo, and I guess while we're in it, we should do maybe a tiny little mini review of the 911 turbo, because in 2024 the 911 turbo was 50 years old. So so this car, the 964, is I guess it's the third generation. The first generation was the first cars that were delivered. 1974, they were 3-litre turbo, no intercooler. They were then superseded in the late 70s by the 3.3 with intercooler. They also changed the rear spoiler for some reason, made the rear spoiler slightly different. If you watch Magnus Walker's videos, you'll see that most of his cars are 3 litres rather than the 3.3s, and they've got a flatter whale tail rather than the later 930s and this, which have kind of got the T-tray with the edges. Perhaps irrelevant, but for the connoisseurs amongst you, I guess fairly important. So yeah, so look, the 964 is the third incarnation of the turbo. I still maintain, whether it's the 930 or this, arguably even the 993, I think lesser so cars thereafter, 996, 997, 991, 992 turbo, I think these cars are more iconic in terms of them representing the original shape. And actually I have a theory about the shape of the 911. When we look at new cars now, I don't know about you, but I can't really tell the difference between a brand new Ferrari and a brand new McLaren or whatever as they whiz past me at 180 miles an hour, because they all look pretty much the same. If you see one static, obviously you can see that there's design cues and badge differences, obviously, but when it comes to the cars themselves, these new cars, you can say the same with the 911 to an extent, are wind tunnel designed. So in other words, they're designed around aerodynamics and drag coefficient or whatever. But when Ferry Porsche first drew the 911, whenever that was, back in 1963, 1964, I think he might have had, albeit maybe subconsciously, something else in mind when he drew the car, and he certainly wasn't thinking about aerodynamics or wind tunnels. I think he was thinking about, here's the controversial bit, but bear with me, the female form, as in how the 911 looks in comparison to the female form. And I think that might be why, it's a bit of automotive psychology for you, that might be why the 911, particularly this shape, the iconic shape, the shape that is true to its original design, is seen as so iconic amongst even 20 and 30-year-olds that were born after these cars were first produced and delivered. These have stood the test of time because I think they're quite erotic. Shoot me down. Let me know what you think in the comments. Anyway, third generation 964, which means that it is a slightly more refined car than the 930. Obviously, you've got the G50 gearbox, which is very, very smooth, light clutch, power steering, coil sprung suspension, different chassis on the 964. A dashboard that's definitely reminiscent of the Porsche of the 70s and the 80s, but is just a little bit tidier. So still very much a kind of raw, true to its roots 911, but in a slightly more sophisticated form, whilst I still think, because of the kind of bulbous rear arches and the very, very characterful front wings and lights, you see where I'm going with this, back to the point I made just now, that it really is the iconic 911. Some might argue that the 964 is really the last true 911, but look, forget that for a second. We can all debate whether we think that the 997 is the best or the 992 is the best 911 ever made, or it's only something with thin bumpers and that predates the G-body. Whatever your bag is, whatever your flavour of favourite 911 is, when it comes to the car that you want to own, I think personally, and the reason that I bought this car was because not only is it still quite raw, organic and visceral, as I said earlier on, but also because the air-cooled 911 is a rarer beast. There are less of them. 991, 992s now, particularly when it comes to turbos, Porsche literally make tens of thousands of them for the worldwide market. And as I referenced earlier, this right-hand drive 964 Turbo Coupe from 1992, I mean, between 90 and 93 in 964 3.3 turbo form, there's only just over 100 of them in the UK. And clearly, school economics tells all of us that if you have limited supply, and as time has gone on, more and more demand from people that want to buy an old school 911, particularly if they want something like this that is a little bit more, innovative and a little bit more comfortable and a little bit more sophisticated than a 930, well then if there's only 100 of them and there's only ever one or two for sale at any one time, no wonder prices now have gone through 150, 160,000 pounds, and no wonder, I guess, that the price of the 3.6 turbo, which is, you know, about twice as rare in the UK as a 3.3, no wonder they are now over 300 grand. So, as I said back there in the barn where I store my cars, as you can probably have guessed, there's an investment case, I think, for buying old school stuff. Particularly if it's stuff that is particularly rare, like this is. So I know I'm waffling on a bit here, guys, and I'm not attempting to sell the car to any of you, but I think in terms of raw driver experience and value, particularly when it comes to future investment appreciation, you're not going to go too far wrong with something like this. Although I maintain, and I genuinely mean this, if this is the only car that doesn't sell, I will not be disappointed. And particularly if Mrs. Quirk gets her way and we end up buying a house rather than a Singer turbo study, because this might not be a Singer and it might be about, what, I don't know, a quarter, a fifth of the price, but it ain't that bad a thing to have by comparison. It's a 911 turbo and it's one of the iconic ones before, and again here's a controversial statement, before they became a bit too ordinary and a bit too easy to drive and a bit too plentiful, which I think is what happened pretty much from 991 onwards. Again, if you disagree with me, by all means stick some abuse in the comments. Never ever fails to bring a smile to your face when that turbo cuts in. And by the way, people talk about turbo lag on the old 911 turbos. I mean, obviously the older the turbo, the 3 litres without intercooler would have been terrible, I get that. Some argue that's part of the character, but there's a bit of lag on this, but it's not that bad at all. It's not as prohibitive as perhaps some would have you believe. And by the way, the other load of old bollocks, frankly, is that the 911 turbo, particularly as they've got newer and newer, are in some way a widow maker. I've owned this car for nearly 3 years. I've never driven it particularly hard, but you know, obviously I've put my foot down when appropriate, shall we say. It's never put me in a difficult position ever. So kind of thoughts and fears about, you know, driving down the high street at 25 miles an hour and losing the back end are totally and utterly unfounded. So this has got 300 brake horsepower more than those two. Okay, so that's about the size of it, I guess. I'm selling my cars, all 6 of them. If you're interested, let me know in the comments, or you'll find me on social media, I'm sure. I'm on LinkedIn and Twitter, Instagram and so on. Yes, any queries, let me know. No time wasters though, thank you very much. No tyre kickers, no can I just come along and have a little look. It's not Disneyland, it's the sale of a few cars, okay? So if you've got the money, if you've got the motivation, and if you genuinely want one of my cars, do let me know and I'll be in touch. I might actually, because I know a couple of rather decent Porsche centres, the likes of Bure Valley Classics and Paul Stevens and so on, I might actually give the cars to them with a view to them selling them. But anyway, let's see. So look, hopefully you've enjoyed this. Can you like it? Actually, whether you've enjoyed it or not, even if you are one of these little trolls that I come across every now and again that wants to slag anything and everything off, I mean, good luck with the rest of your life and all that. I'm sorry that you're so unhappy. But like it, please, subscribe, and apparently you're supposed to hit that little notification bell so that when we do another one, and by the way, the next one is going to be choice, you will be notified accordingly. That's it. Porschenomics over and out. I nearly forgot. Car number 7 was my very interesting and very fast, very bespoke Rennsport. which I bought about a year and a half ago, and I've just sold back to Rennsport. So that was car number 7, the first one I've sold, and got my money back, which actually, I have to say, is pretty good, considering that was a very expensive car. £215,000 for a bespoke Rennsport backdate rester mod, whatever you want to call it. You can see here, actually in the B-roll, that car that we profiled on a video previously when I first bought it. So that car has gone, first one to sell, money back, £215,000, that's about $260,000. So for the eagle-eyed, for the pedants of you that were adding these cars up as you went along thinking, that's nowhere near $1 million, now it is. Anyway, thanks again, until next time.